thanks to our Dean, Amy Dinas, and Provost Margaret Everett for coming today. Thank you both. I want to thank Catherine Shizawa, Director of Community Engagement, for her support in this series. I want to thank Peter Reed for his financial support in terms of tonight's program. And also in terms of putting together the Kith Kin show, which was a really major undertaking. I want to thank Lesley Art Design Exhibitions Director Andrew Mrozek. Thank you, Andrew. And a wonderful MFA in Visual Arts and Music Management, Untitled Choi. Thank you, Rebecca. It's really wonderful to have such collaborative colleagues and to put this thing together as a labor of love. I also want to thank tonight's speakers. We've had a whirlwind visit to Lesley this week. In fact, the last couple days, they've done student workshops, they've done class visits, they've done one-on-one critiques, and even had a gallery chat, so they've really been really energetic in supporting our school. And I'm thrilled to introduce them, JooYoung Choi and Trenton Doyle Hancock, who are artists based in Houston. Their work is a rich tapestry of personal biography, imagined fictions, cultural mythologies, and it crosses media to include painting, sculpture, film, animation, and the graphic arts. In a larger sense, their art practice, with its diversity of content and material approach, in the midst of a much larger, powerful social commentary, perfectly reflects our sensibility at Lesley Art Design. Their feature exhibition can be seen in our Races Gallery in the London Art Center, and is the first time they've exclusively shared a gallery exhibition together. So we're thrilled to be the setting for that. And as you heard before, Jamie and Trenton had met each other before, but it's through our program and the studio mentor aspect that they really got to know each other and later got married. So we're really proud to tell that story So JooYoung is a distinguished alum of our MFA in the Visual Arts program, and she graduated in 2012. In those 7 short years, her artwork has been exhibited at venues such as the Contemporary Art Museum in Houston, Project Roadhouses in Houston, the Wing Museum of Asian Pacific American Experience in Seattle, the National Museum of Mexican Art in Chicago, and the Lawndale Art Center. And upcoming venues for her work include the Parrish Art Museum in New York and the Crystal Bridges Museum in Arkansas. And many of you in this room have seen Trenton's major solo show, Mind of the Mound, A Critical Mass, recently on view at Mass MoCA. And his work has been subject of solo exhibitions at venues including the Contemporary Art Museum St. Louis, the Weatherspoon Museum in Greensboro, the Modern Art Museum in Fort Worth, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Miami, the ICA in Philly, and the Fruit Market Gallery in Edinburgh. His work is in the permanent collections of institutions such as MoMA, the Whitney Museum, the Brooklyn Museum, SF MoMA, the Menil Collection, and the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. So it's my pleasure to introduce Trenton Doyle Hancock and JooYoung Choi.
Thank you, Ben, for that introduction. And yes, it's amazing to be here, and amazing to be here under the circumstances that I am. Having my beautiful and talented wife be honored by her alma mater. It's just an amazing testament that I've seen over the past 7, 8 years of her just building her repertoire, and me being fortunate enough to just be in the vicinity to grow by association. So just making sure I can work this thing here. All right. Again, it's amazing to be back here in Boston, and specifically here at Lesley. And I'll just kind of walk you through, for about 10, 12 minutes, an overview of what I do. So I have created my own universe called the Mound Verse, and at the center of that universe is a dome-like character who I see as the receptacle of my memories and the collective memories of a culture through cross-generationally, sort of a stand-in for the earth and all that the earth absorbs, both from within and from without. Circling around the mound are other characters that have consequence with this character. Some are antagonists, some are there to protect this creature, but the Mound sort of, in some ways, in asking questions of it, the answers are more and more characters, so that character for me is a very generative one. What you're seeing here is the first page of a 400-page graphic novel that I'm embarking on. Started it a few years ago, but it's an attempt to put in a linear fashion all of these stories that I've been telling over the past 20-something years. I graduated from Tyler School of Art with my master's in painting, but my roots are in comics. You know, when I was in high school, I thought I would graduate and go work for Marvel, perhaps, with my portfolio under my arm, but I ended up going to junior college, on to a four-year college, and studying painting, studying printmaking, performance art, illustration, and all of these various disciplines. But I never lost sight of this idea of world building in a very particular sense, focusing around the idea of the hero. When I was 10 years old, I created this character, Torpedo Boy. And Torpedo Boy was me if I took my glasses off and became this superhero. It was a way for me to cope with the fact that I could not, that I seemed incongruent with the social behaviors of the children around me. So I created a space that I could go into where I had agency and I had power. But it was also a way for me to practice a craft. And ultimately I saw myself making more and more characters, perhaps going into the world of comics. Here we see the character Trenton Doyle Hancock inviting you into the Mound so you can see what's inside. Inside of the Mound is what's called Mound meat. It's just circling around. It's always in flux, and it creates energy as it twirls and swirls around, pours over itself, ultimately helping the Mound create color, and mounds communicate through color. And this is a painting from 2005 called Cult Jam. And the antagonists for the mounds are what's called vegans. And the vegans are little bony creatures that live under the earth. And they just want to destroy mounds and all that mounds stand for, which is love and abundance and color, and what they're filled with is meat, and the vegans hate the meat and they want to spill it every chance they get. But there once was a good vegan named Saint Sesame, and he was a vegan priest. And Saint Sesame was visited by the spirit energy of color. And vegans can't see in color, so the spirit energy of Painter, at the end of Sesame's day, he would go to sleep, and Painter would visit him in his dreams and show him a color. And he was so excited to go to sleep every night, because every night she would show him a different color. And one night she showed him the full spectrum of color. And he woke up waving his arms in excitement, and she appeared to him and said, "Behold, Sesame, I am Painter, and these sensations that you've been feeling, these are colors. These are these sensations that have been withheld from vegan kind since the beginning." And she went on to say that vegans are not actually supposed to hate mounds because they're fathered by the same ape man. And she said to him that vegans must show themselves friendly to these mounds and ask them for mound meat so that they can use in rituals. And they would take hits of mound meat and see colors and regain their humanity. So this was about a 6-year story arc that I embarked on, and it involved making paintings. This is a miracle machine, and miracle machines work by putting mound meat in one end and colors come out the other end. So these are machines to help the revolution. This is a colored etching that I did in 2005 or 6, I can't remember, at Harlan and Weaver Press in Chinatown. This is also from that same suite called Theosified, and I do believe these prints are in the gallery to be seen. Here I am as Saint Sesame, and surrounding me are the vegan disciples, part of the cult of color. I would go through and name them all. Oh, what the heck. There's Paul, there's Beto Wachow, there's Anthony, Baby Kurt and Shy Cherry, F. Shine, Bow-Headed Lou, and in the middle, that's Saint Sesame. He was the leader of that motley crew. I was approached by Ballet Austin in Austin, Texas, and we collaborated over 3 years to make a ballet based on Saint Sesame and the cult of color. So I collaborated with several institutions, including the Fabric Workshop in Philadelphia, to do the backdrop. Yeah, it was insane to see the characters moving through space. And there's Painter. And this is somewhat after the ballet was finished. This was a project that I took on in 2008, 2009 in Seattle at the Olympic Sculpture Park. And this was called A Better Promise. And people were encouraged to bring in their plastic tops from their water bottles and detergents and such, unrecyclable material, and to put in the proper vitrines. Ultimately, I wanted them to throw them through the hand and land in the vitrines, but there was a kind of insurance and issues with having strangers come in and throw things at the wall. They discouraged that. My work is heavily about investigating the self, like a kind of self-archaeology. And I see them all as self-portraits. Some are more literal than others. This is the gray remains of a friendship scarred. This is a piece called Mold. And my work is also modular. It expands and contracts, and I use certain forms that are very simple forms as building blocks. And you'll see this striped, black and white striped form. I use it over and over again, and it doubles over on itself and becomes a piece like this. But this idea of the all over exploded composition is something I've been working with for a long time. Here's a print that I did in Singapore called The Offering. This is a piece called A Sweet Hell. This is a 6 by 6 foot painting, which was sort of a history painting for myself that I did about 4 years ago, about three years ago, called When They Found Me, I Was Already Gone. This is version number 2. And to go from something that's so kind of heavy and dark, I go back and forth between, these very brooding things and these more poppy, bright things, because I try to explore a whole range of emotion in the work. And this is a little painting that has to do with Mound number 1. He just wants a big hug. He wants you to be his buddy. And that piece went along with a toy project that I embarked on in 2015, where I did an edition of Mound dolls, and I wanted those dolls to look like something that you would get at Toys R Us in 1985. So we reverse engineered all these different processes and found, you know, the perfect weight, the perfect size, and the colors, and so I designed all the packaging and everything for this creature. And each one of the edition has a different colored nose to express a different emotion. So now, this is a show that just ended a few days ago at Mass MoCA here in Massachusetts. And I was able to basically make a theme park inside the museum that was dedicated to the Mound Verse. There was a little shop with this kind of ominous character that had all the various toys and Halloween costumes that I've created over the years. So he's kind of standing guard over the inventory. And JooYoung actually sewed that punk frog character there, that puppet. And there's a kind of a view from above there. This is Undum Angel, and she's the soul of a dead mound that soul grew up to be this goddess, a goddess of color. And she's actually the strongest being in the Mound Verse. And a lot of my most recent stories have to do with her discovering the upper ceilings of her power. And here's an 8x8 foot painting that shows Undum decapitating this she-wolf who attacked the place where she was. So she defended all these souls and little children by destroying this she-wolf. Here's the character Torpedo Boy. And this time he's manifesting as a warrior with this football armor. And this sort of doubles back onto my childhood as I played football for 6 years, all the way through high school. And it was just, yeah, part of my life that I thought, I'm never gonna have to reference that again, but as I said, I'm always digging back into this kind of, doing these archaeological digs into the self, and my football uniform came back, so I figured it's a good time to show that. And here's Torpedo Boy in his warrior gear being chased by one of Philip Guston's Klansmen. And inside of that Klansman, vegans are pouring out the mouth and under the skirt of this kind of ominous creature. And behind it is a comic that I made up and sort of redrew into kind of a wallpaper behind these characters. And this piece is about the same size as you're seeing here. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming here tonight and letting us share about our art. Before I start, since some people haven't gone to the gallery space yet, I thought I might play a little bit of my video art to introduce you to the imaginary world that my work is based upon. And while I was working on my thesis, I was able to fully develop kind of the flora and fauna foundation of this world. So this short video art piece will show you about 5 or 6 of the continents from my imaginary world.
Called give them great work.
Yup, 13 seconds.
So the rest of the video, you can watch it in the gallery, in the exhibition space. But I thought at least that way you would be able to see a collection of the different types of media that I work with, between making my own puppets, doing animation, drawing, and some of the backgrounds are taken from some of my paintings. I'm not sure how to get back to the PowerPoint. That's the last. No, gotta go all the way to the beginning. Okay, cool. It was like a little preview, you got to see. Yeah. So I was trying to figure out where do I start to explain the world that I've built and the art that I've created, and I thought I would start at the beginning. So this is the way beginning. I don't know if you can figure out which one's me in the family photo. It's the one with the messy hair. So I was adopted from Seoul, South Korea, and since I was very young, I started drawing and making my own stories. I would even convince my babysitters to write the words before I could write, and then I would draw the pictures. And one of the books there's like an excerpt about Prince Amos, the first mouse to go to the moon. I created him in first grade, and he's a puppet that was featured in the video that you watched. So it's been fun to kind of see these characters since childhood continue to grow with me. The one thing that was troubling as a child, as much as I filled my life with creativity and art and storytelling, was that I didn't know who my birth parents were being adopted. And so through painting, I found that I could try to capture what I thought maybe my parents looked like. And this was from a project in undergrad. During that time, I was searching for my father, and the summer after I painted this, I went to Korea, and I found my birth father. And I showed him this painting, and I said, but your cheekbones are the same in your hair. And he said, of course, because I'm your father. You know what I should look like. And we got along really well. Yeah. And those aren't his glasses, those are actually my husband's, but he'll put on anyone's glasses. And so I asked my birth father where my mother was, and he said that they had lost contact, so the next summer I went back and searched for her, and luckily I was able to find her. And I had made this painting before I had gotten to meet her and I was just shocked. This was the first time that we had met. I took her photo and I just couldn't believe how similar she looked to the painting. And that kind of sparked this beginning for me to realize that my art was able to fill in the gaps of my life. Even if these questions had never been answered, they were doing something powerful that I didn't fully understand yet. And we got along really well too. And in this painting, I had decided to make up a wedding dress for her because when I met my birth father, he said, "I'm sorry we never were able to get married." And I went back home and made her her own wedding dress. But when I met her, she was able to show me pictures of her wedding a few years later. And over time, it was amazing. My art was all about desire and yearning to find a family. And then I went from having one family in Concord, New Hampshire, my adoptive family, to having two families in South Korea. My birth mother's side of the family, where I have two brothers, and then my birth father with my little sister and my stepmother, and a whole slew of relatives. So you went from very small to, bam, big family. This was great, but the only issue was all my work was about desire and yearning and wishing for connection, and now I had a lot of connections, so I was like, thanks a lot, what am I going to paint about now? And so one of the other things that was interesting is when I would visit Korea, it was so different than what I thought it was going to be like. I had only seen things on television or in National Geographic or books about magic dragons and mythology, and so my perception of what I thought Korea was not very much like the place I visited. And I thought maybe in between me growing up in Concord, New Hampshire, and Seoul, there was this other world that I had been building all those years to try to make sense of not knowing who I was or where I came from. And I could either see that as this terrible lie and a loss that I spent all those years building this imaginary world, or I could use it as the foundation to build something quite grand, and to see that my imagination as a child was an important thing that kept me strong. And so it became the foundation for my thesis for graduate school at Lesley. And because of some extraordinary people, including, sorry, I'm getting a little emotional, it's really special to be here. Tonia Pesos and Laurel Sparks, and my husband, Trenton Doyle Hancock, I was able to build this world that combined my life in America and my life in Korea and the world I've been creating in my imagination into one place called the Cosmic Womb. There's a book about adoption called The Primal Wound, which states that children who are being separated from their mothers, even from the time in the womb, they have this primal wound of separation. And I thought if we have a primal wound, we should be allowed to have a cosmic womb, a place that we can go back to heal and to grow and to explore our feelings about all of the things that people deal with throughout the cycles of life. And so I thought, well, if I'm gonna build a world, I need a protagonist. And I thought of my love of the Wizard of Oz books and Alice in Wonderland, and I thought, who would be the protagonist that my younger self would just go wild for? And so I created C.S. Watson, who happened to be adopted from Seoul, South Korea to Concord, New Hampshire as well. The difference between us, we both love to draw, but her drawings could come alive. And so I created a story where her imaginary friend decides to bring her to the cosmic womb, versus having an imaginary friend come to visit you on Earth. What if we flipped it? And once I created her, then I had to create an entourage of friends for her. And since I didn't really have a big budget, I decided to be all of my own imaginary friends. So as you can see here, I started learning how to green screen and do video art, and in my garage was able to create, this is a still from one of, I think my second or third video. So through multimedia, which I've shown you earlier, and through painting, I've been able to build out this world. So we went from a single character to an entourage of friends to now this is the whole universe. And if you're ever wondering where the cosmic womb is, it's, see that yellow kind of orb sphere? In the center of that is where the cosmic womb is, and it's about 7,200 light years away from here. So if you ever want to visit, it might take a little bit of time. And through these journeys that I write down, or oral stories, I've been able to create crazy pieces of art that the story almost becomes like a map that navigates this logic where I'm like, well, I have to cut the canvas open, and I have to do this, and I have to do that, and it's all based on trying to follow these wild narratives and interests in forms and shapes and color. And here are a few other examples of kind of these adventures I go on through the paintings. And from paintings came the question of trying out three-dimensional versions of them. So this is Perennial Favorites, who is a brontosaurus that survived when we decided that brontosauruses weren't real anymore. She's about, I think, 10 feet long if you stretch out her tail, and about 8 feet tall. And here are some of the other large-scale sculptures of some of our villains from my imaginary world. And I've also been able to do installations. This one was at Project Row Houses and featured 2 black stars from outer space from the Cosmic Womb narrative. And one of the other things that's thrown into my practice is interactive art. And so for this project, I was thinking about what happens to all of the snow people that we make that evaporate. And I thought, oh, well, they could just go to the Cosmic Womb. What if their ice crystal DNA melts here and reforms in outer space, and they've just been collecting on some strange island? What if we taught them how to not melt and brought them back to Earth? And since children in Houston, Texas, where I live now, do not have the same relationship to snow as I did growing up in New England, I thought, what if we brought snow people to the children of Houston? And what if we can make it so that people who can't afford my art can spend a week living with my art without having to deal with all of the issues of insurance for art or the cost of it? And so we made 10 snow people aliens, and they got to live with different families throughout Houston. And we had a portrait studio day. And so you can see here's me delivering their snow person for the project. And if you ever want to keep up on the snow people, they have their own Facebook website. And so part of this project was that everyone had to update us as to every day take a photo of themselves with their snow person to let us know how their snow person is doing. And it was kind of the beginning of me realizing, oh, I can share this dream with other people. And so from there, I started doing interactive projects where we infiltrated a Wichita, Kansas parade with my magical dinosaur you saw earlier, who was searching for her brother. And so we were in the parade, and then we reinstalled one of my museum sculpture pieces in the middle of their rock festival. And it's been fun because the journey just continues. It's one whole long saga narrative between all of these characters. And the children that came to the event were able to make art to help the dinosaur find its way back to Houston, Texas. Let's see, here's another still video art. And so the video art that you saw, another thing that's come up with sculpture and with the idea of using the moving image is creating actual artifacts from that world. So this is a design that I used to create what televisions from my imaginary world would look like too. So trying to find every little facet as to how can I make this world 100% believable and real to myself and others. And so I don't think that this will play, because these are just images, right? So these were kind of stills of all the different media that I'm able to learn about, such as the music that you, soundtrack and music from any of the videos that you'll hear over in the gallery. I compose myself, the costumes that I create, drawing, painting, digital art. And currently my work has been interested in these battles. I started making battle paintings, one of which is in the gallery. And with battles come consequences and conflict, and people coming together to stand up for what they believe in. And so I started thinking about these individual characters and how they're being taken, being torn apart from those they love in my battle paintings. And one of the characters was named Pancake Man, and he started as an animation, and then he became a puppet. We brought him to Denny's to test him out with people. He's the blue guy in the center. And then he became part of the paintings. And I thought, how would he feel about this war that's happening in outer space? And so I thought, what if he was a single dad from outer space that had lost his daughter? And so for my latest exhibition, I started creating the children of some of these grown-up characters that I've been working with. So you can see here, at the Beaumont Art Museum, we decided to create a portal where different family members and refugees from the wars that I've been painting were able to finally be reunited with one another. I was trying to figure out a way that people who are separate from one another can feel close, and I thought, if we can't physically be near each other, we can be close to each other through our dreams. And I thought, what if I could design a superhighway of dreams and have a vehicle that could transport people who are far away from one another and reunite them? And I thought a bed, like a magical sentient bed, might be a good way to do that. So you can see here, there's a number of different families that have been separated that were reunited in this image. And these sculptures are, I do all the carpentry myself, and then they're hand-sewn using fleece, and usually I pin them, and then I do workshops in my studio teaching people from my community and neighbors how to sew, and then we have these large sewing circles together. So my latest project right now, I'm working on a film called Spectra Force 5, and through the city of Houston and the Idea Fund with the Andy Warhol Foundation grant, I've been interviewing women of color and non-binary people of color about sci-fi fantasy and how it's affected their life, whether they saw themselves reflected in it and whether that shaped their self-esteem in positive or negative ways. And if they could go back in time and create a superhero that would make them feel empowered, what would their character look like or be like, and what would their powers be? And so together, I took all of their ideas and wrote a 135-page script. And I've been storyboarding the whole piece out, which we will be hopefully filming in the next few months as about a 60-minute film. And so I just wanted to at least give thank you to all of the volunteers. So I kind of put together a few photos of people who have come to my studio just to help me with different projects. And if you ever end up in Houston, Texas, and you want to come help out, I'd love to make some art with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you both for those wonderful talks. I want to invite you up. I just have 3 questions to chat about, and then we can open up the entire audience. So. Okay, good. Well, thank you for those wonderful introductions to your work. I'm just really amazed on the first thing that comes to mind is, A, the level of productivity is just incredible, but also the willingness to allow the work to kind of evolve narratively or through material, and I wonder if each of you could talk a little bit about that. Like, you're very willing to move between material that I guess we don't see very often.
Well, I feel like for me, I've always been interested in trying to make an art that reflects the complexity of life. So it's easy to, I wouldn't say easy, but it comes natural, you know. I think drawing those things out in books, drawing and painting comes a little bit more natural, but at some point, the drawings aren't big enough, the paintings aren't big enough. In terms of, you know, why have a painting try to do what a film should do, or why have a painting do what a sequence of images in terms of like a comic book could do. So, and I've also always been interested in giving back to the histories that I feel like created me. So, you know, animation, film, comics, and toy design, that kind of thing. So yeah, in that regard, it does feel very natural as an outgrowth of the practice to expand it in that way.
And as part of that, how you self-educate, JooYoung, you talked about learning new crafts or learning animation or adding your own music into it. Do you see that as an integral part of your creative practice, the constant learning?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like every few months I'll tell Trent that I want to learn how to do something else. And then, I don't know, was it 6 months ago, I was like, I'm going to learn how to play guitar. And then he'll just hear me banging away at a guitar for, I don't know, a few weeks straight, and he's so patient about it. Because I wanted to create like a punk rock anthem for the newest film project. And it was just the flexibility of having to learn something brand new and to stick with it and to have confidence. I can figure out the patterns, I can figure out these rhythms, I can teach myself how to do this, has been, it's kind of like the first time that we made a video art piece where I didn't think I could make a puppet, so I ordered a pattern. I taught myself how to make puppets. I started talking to puppet people, learned about green screen, dragged him into the garage of my studio, and he hid behind a cardboard box and made a pink octopus puppet that I made sing a song with me. And when we watched it, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, this is the TV show I wanted to watch as a kid. And then I was just kind of hooked on it. Like, how many more things can I make that my younger self would have just would have made her heart soar when she was young? And I think that inner, instead of having a critic that's like, this is never good enough, I have about a 12-year-old who's very bossy, always next to me being like, yeah, that was pretty good. I think you need to do that one more time. You need more octopuses, you need more dinosaurs, you need, why don't you make something that's taller or bigger than you? And to have a husband that's been so supportive in that, it's been really wonderful to share.
I feel like kind of strong themes in your work. There's a real theme of joy, there's a real theme of magic, but I also wonder, there's a kind of powerful activism in the work, and there's a term, I guess I've been thinking a lot about, where folks are talking about pleasure activism, like this sense of liberation through color and through community and through elements of pleasure that reinforce really a kind of self-determination and authority, like self-authority, away from elements that might marginalize or hurt the self. So I was wondering, do you think about in terms of that, or how would you relate issues of pleasure activism in the work?
It's interesting. For me, it's as much about sort of corruption as it is about kind of like what you would describe as pleasure activism, because growing up in a pretty fundamentalist Christian household, the themes of repression and guilt and all of those things, fear, were so prevalent that I think I absorbed them in a kind of way that was, well, how can I see that echoed in media that's not harmful to me? And I felt that media was liberating, like horror films and that kind of thing. So I think I'm always searching to scare people more than I am to, but there is a kind of joy that comes from, for me creating this media that I feel is, I was speaking with Frank Oz about this, about how, like Dark Crystal, has a healthy dose of fear in it. And without the fear factor, it's hard to, especially in children's media, to create a space that's healthy for you to have a distance from the fear, but also learn to manage it through the media. And I'm always kind of thinking about that. I think, but that's where that ebb and flow of where things that are really super cute and kind of inviting versus those things those tunnels that you go down that are dark and you can't really see the edges, and it is more about the fear part of it. But I think through that, I find a community, it's almost it's a byproduct of just kind of following this, I guess, trajectory that is about my own particular childhood and how, I'm trying to, again, for me, talk to my 5, 10, 12-year-old self and learn from that person about, well, what did you think about growing up in a household like that, and what can that character teach me about it?
Yeah, because JooYoung, when I saw this most recent presentation, I couldn't help but think about issues of families which are separated for all kinds of reasons, especially now with the crisis at the border. It just seems like this was such a powerful way to address that, and I imagine a place like Texas in that context would kind of amplify that.
Yeah, and it was interesting because it started with just thinking about, sometimes I just like to think about a memory and daydream about it, almost like you're putting a VHS in. You can just think about how good that felt. And when I met my birth father for the first time, it's one of those memories I like to replay. And I thought, what if I could make a sculpture that really embodied that? And that's where the Pancake Man narrative came from. But then while I was building this thing, I'm hearing about all these families being separated from one another. And I can't ignore that. And so that's where I realized I really needed to investigate it and do something within my opportunity to have an exhibition to say something about it. And that's when I contacted the museum and said, can we make this a reunion center, and can we build a big portal? And I'm gonna make this giant flying bed, and we're gonna have different family members. And that project was so amazing. We got the City Hall of Houston to let me put one of the single mothers from outer space that was trying to find her children. We installed her in City Hall months before the show and shared the whole story of her trying to find her children. And then it explains that you can go, her children have been located, but they won't get here for a while. So you can come see them at the beautiful mountain, which is Beaumont, at their art museum. So it was fun to be able to have the story travel across time and space and make us, I think, a special statement.
So my final question is, a lot of your work really interacts with the audience in a very powerful way. And Trenton had seen your show several times, and I was struck how different my experience was in relation to who was in the space with me, and like watching their experience, or just sort of moving along what felt like Candyland into these different enclosures. And I'm wondering about, for both of you, what is the audience feedback experience for you like? How does it inform the work, or add different context to the work? There's something about when you make the work and it has its own life out in the world. And I'm wondering about your experience in terms of that.
It's been interesting hearing people's interpretation of the pieces, and sometimes they have better ideas than me. And I'll be like, oh, I never thought of that. Maybe that is the genesis of this character. I'll take a note on that. Yeah, people's perception of the work and what they've shared. I mean, the soft sculpture workshop we did here, where people were able to make flowers that will be added to the gardens that you saw in the installations from my next 2 museum exhibitions. Hearing people's stories and interacting in that way was very moving. And I know that even if I am not translating their stories right now into my work, that my work will never be the same after spending time with the artists here and making art with them.
I think, yeah, for me, especially with the show at Mass Mocha, what was interesting was that since there was it was like layers of my life were peeled back, and that was what was presented in the show. To see people come in and empathize, or kind of find themselves in the work was. I don't think it was something that I fully expected, not in the way that, the kinds of emotions that were tapped into. Again, there was some very heavy moments in that show about growing up with in the Reagan era with this extreme conservatism, and with folks, my parents, that were always kind of looking at Christian propaganda as a kind of truth, and how that there were suggestions that my folks succumbed to, and there was traumas that were inflicted upon my brother and I, And so some of that stuff comes out in the show, and people relate to it. And then you hear about these stories, and I get to commiserate with people. I get to hear what their side of it is, and sometimes it's like, I never thought there would be someone that would be able to articulate this very kind of painful corner of their life, or that they could share. And that was a really beautiful and interesting thing. I think the other thing is that show is very much about collect, and the kind of obsession that I've had my whole life. The idea that I like to gather objecthood and put those things out in front of me and step back and just stare at them. And that was how I played with my toys. It wasn't like, boom, 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 I'm gonna, I was very protective over the integrity of the objects. So I was a weird kid in that way. It's like I'd rather just keep the box and look at the box and study all of the illustrations. And of course my folks didn't understand any of that, but I would set up all the He-Man characters in the bedroom, spend hours doing it, and then just stand in the doorway and watch and look at it for hours. And it's what I do in the studio now. So I think there was a kind of reciprocity in terms of the show that I was seeing people revert back to their childhood, and I was seeing perhaps how other people played with their toys or had an understanding of their toys through the stories that they would recount back to me. But I was able to kind of sit back as a fly on the wall and do the exact same thing I was doing in my bedroom, of looking at the whole vista and watching people interact with the work, and they were the action figures now. So it was this like coming full circle of, I've created my own giant board game, my own Candyland, my own He-Man playset, but instead of He-Man, Skeletor, Beastman, it's these beautiful people from off the streets coming through, pouring through the work, engaging with it, and then I get to kind of sit back and, in a weirdly scientific kind of way, just take stock, and say, okay, this is where we are now, and I wonder what's next.
Great. Are there questions for our artists today?
I was wondering, is there any intersection or interaction between the Mound Verse and the Activism? Is there any interplay?
Well, I'm very lucky to have a great puppeteer over here. So the pink octopus putt-putt, who has eczema, which you may have seen in the video, riding on a paper airplane to easy listening during the earlier video. He does the voice for one of the star octopus.
Yeah, I wish we had brought
I wish
the
we brought
puppet.
putt-putt.
Yeah.
Yeah, Putt-Putt talks like this. He's real excitable. He loves life, but he kind of, wait a minute, where am I?
And so it has been really fun. I'll write a song, like I wrote a song about driving safety, and Puppet has a solo in it. So I'll sing it to him and play the Casio piano, and then he'll sing along and he picks it right up, and I'll record his voice for the vocals and backups for different songs that I write, which is awesome. I think that our words collaborate just through us sharing too.
Yeah, definitely the sharing of a space and of a life, and kind of the understanding that the kind of space that we both need as artists, both in a passive and in a proactive and interactive way. Yeah, we've come to understand that kind of rhythm, and when we go out and like our social life consists of hanging out with our cat, and who is appeared in one of the videos, and going thrift shopping, going to flea markets, and gathering information, and we bring it back, and then through osmosis, I think those objects and ideas and things enter into both of our works. But we've talked about intersections, narratively speaking, where there might be some bridges, but we haven't revealed any of that yet. But I think, yeah, there's some places. Yeah.
One thing that interests me about work like this, the idea of world building, is that you're making this thing that has a self-consistency. And I think that's something that all artists in their roots do. But what you do is so self-conscious and so clearly the case. It's a self-conscious world that's separate from the real world. At the same time, echoes it, mirrors it, somehow corresponds to it. And what interests me most about that process is the therapeutic aspect and self-therapy, the self-healing involved. I mean, one of the common things in MFA programs I've seen is the student talks about the work and then the critic will say partially, art is not about therapy, which is of course bullshit. It's only about therapy. Tell me about that. How does it work for you as therapy? Or is that too much bad?
That's actually my favorite question. Well, for me, after I think it was during, but my emancipation from Christianity, and this idea that there was only one way to look at the world, and it was later in life, I was 20 years old, 21 years old when I learned that there were other books, you know what I mean? That I took a class in college under Dr. Mosley at East Texas State University, the Hero in Modern Society, Hero in Myth. And I took the course, quite honestly, because I saw that the word hero was on there, and I thought we'd be drawing pictures of Superman in the class. And I got in there, and I was at first disappointed, but then I realized, oh, I'm in the exact right place I need to be, because this is telling me that Christianity is just one myth amongst a whole sea or ocean of myth. And at that point, I said, not exactly my whole life was a lie, but there's some self-searching that I have to do. And I think that's when my understanding of art as therapy actually began, like my conscious understanding of it. I mean, the way I was using it as a child was definitely that, the creation of Torpedo Boy, my superhero, was a way for me to equalize my life, Things aren't happening right out there, things on the page are happening right, so at some place in the middle they meet, and there's this contract that happens. So I would say it's in the mid-90s, I was in college, and I was like, yeah, this is, aside from my course loads and all of that work, I was doing heavy dream studies, recording all of my dreams, entering into this kind of psychological space that I found to be just as rich as anything that was external. And it was through that I was able to navigate and kind of build, what JooYoung calls the paracosm, and I was able to understand, oh, I can structure like a whole, like not just a room, not just a building, but a whole universe. And I think that those were the seeds of my understanding of art as therapy, and not just in a sense of it was a very personal thing that wasn't just therapy at the top of it. It was therapy alongside the idea of spirituality, alongside the idea of kind of understanding and building a political worldview, identity, my understanding of myself as a black man, a person of color, moving through space, moving through the art world and what that meant. I was able to kind of start to build a hierarchy of meaning, and therapy definitely was part of that. I always say, I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have art, and I feel blessed to be in a culture that appreciates art and resources it, and that we can do things like this and talk to people about it.
When it all comes to art and therapy, I was asked one time if my art I've been building, I've been able to I've been able to express myself in ways that I couldn't with words, and to understand the longitudes and latitudes of my own emotions about things that I can't change in the real world. And also to realize that my eyes can't tell the difference between what I see on a painting on a subconscious level. What I see, my brain can't tell the difference between reality and what I manifest. And so through creating these paintings, maybe I can find some peace or some sense of control in a situation that feels uncontrollable. And I've found so many times where something felt like I could never resolve it, but then through art and the relationships I've built through creating these crazy projects, something magically gets resolved.
Wondering about, I was wondering about ballet and when someone else enters into the world and brings their own vision into that landscape for you, what happens with that? Is it something that you are interested in pursuing further, sort of giving over sort of control and collaboration in that world?
Yeah, I think that was embarking on the ballet was sort of my first. I've collaborated many times since then in different capacities, but that was one of the big ones. And I didn't know what I was getting into. I just knew that at that time in my career, in my life, I was ready to move out of the white cube and do something that I thought was risky, adventurous. I wanted to shake things up for myself. And I just happened to get a phone call from Stephen Mills, who's the choreographer at Ballet Austin. And he had the same idea. He wanted to do something that was reaching outside of the strictures of, Swan Lake or, what have you, Nutcracker. He wanted to do something very different. And I'd never seen a ballet before, so I thought, well, when's the next time that you're going to be performing something? And I went to a few of his performances and realized, oh, this is a person that we have a very similar sensibility, just in terms of movement, in terms of how forms manifest and overlap with one another, and this interest in narrative. So, yeah, I jumped out on a limb. We had a great collaboration. I designed all the sets, the costumes, of course, wrote all the material, but it was this massaging of the material in the writer's room. So it was between the composer, who was Graham Reynolds, who worked with Richard Linklater on films and different things. So Graham, Stephen, and I, we would sit and kind of reroute some of the character development and make it fit for the 50-minute piece that we were creating. So there had to be a clear arc and a falling action and some sort of a resolution. And so that was a process of being there in a directorial sense, but also being open to having these ideas kind of shape and move these characters around in terms of their motivation and what their identity was. And something like that really does help you grow, because if you open yourself up to and trust other artists and artisans and idea producers and makers, then you expand what you're capable of as well. And I think that's something that my practice has been predicated on pretty early. But there is this sense of control that I do have, that there's boundaries that I will not go past.
We have one more question, and you can always chat with the artist at the reception afterwards. Any final questions?
More of a comment, I just can't believe how it's such a rare thing that you two are so perfect together as artists. It seems like such a rare thing to find two artists that both create these fantasy worlds, build universes, have the same sense of whimsy and adventure, and have found each other and now work together like this. I think it's kind of miraculous, almost as miraculous as Joy painting a mother and then manifesting the same image in reality. I mean, it just makes me think about the psychic power of the artists really possess, whether they know it or not, but they just practice their art. And that's why seeing you, so I'm sorry, it's more of a comment than a question, but I can't believe, I was very familiar with JooYoung from grad school, but from Trenton, I didn't know your work that well, and I can't believe, I'm so glad I came to hear you and see how wonderful you guys are together.
Well, thank you both.
Thank you.
Yeah.